Seabury Design. We now have our blog module complete, it's functional, and we're ready to distribute it. So we need to create some sort of a zip file with all the necessary resources to go ahead and distribute this module. What we're going to do is open up VisualStudio.net, and I'm going to close up some of the stuff that we're not using now, because we're done with all of this. And we're going to go into installation. You'll see that our original template built two things for us here. It built a zip file, and if you open that up, there's really nothing in it, I believe, at this point. Yep, that's completely empty, and I'm just going to shrink that down for now. And then you can double click on blog DNN, and Visual Studio is good enough to know that it's an XML file, and it will open it. I'm just going to close some of the extra windows here, because again, we're done with these things, and I don't want to have a problem if we go to put any of them into this zip file. Okay, so taking a look at this, it's obviously just an XML file. I haven't found a problem yet with it saying .NETNuke version 2.0, even though we're working in 3.0. I think I've tried turning it to 3 as well, and it doesn't seem to make a difference, but I think for now you should stick with 2.0 until you see some different version numbers coming up in here. In any event, what we're going to do is it's going to create a folder somewhere, and it's going to create a folder with this name, and I'm actually going to change this just to blog. I don't need to have my Seabury Design SD in there. And the version. And here's all the modules. This is everything that's going to go into that folder and needs to be included. So here is the controls. The title of the controls blog. Here's the name of the file and view. Now, if you remember previously, here, let me log out. I want to show you what this relates to, although it should be fairly self-explanatory, but let's just make sure that it's clear that all these extra fields, while I'm waiting for that, all these extra fields are talking about your module definition. And when we went in and set up blog before, we set it up as a view, and I told you to set up your edit key as a key of edit for blog edit. And settings also, I said used edit, even though it was kind of weird that they don't have a settings. There we go. Log in, host. Apparently, there we go. Had my caps lock on. Host, module definitions. And that should come up in a second. Here we go. And blog. Again, okay. So we set these up as the blog ASCX was a view module. Edit, we set up as edit, and settings. All of these settings are going to actually be set up right in here. Beneath that is a list of files, and this is all the files that need to be included that need to be uploaded to the server and need to be included in this DNN file. So here's the actual ASCX file, the blog edit, the settings, the DLL modules that are being created, and double check just to make sure that these are actually the right names. They should be from the template, but if you've gone and tweaked anything, you want to make sure that everything in here is the right name. You're free to remove anything that you want to if you don't want to upload the icon for some reason, because we didn't actually change the icon. It's still just a generic looking icon. That's fine. Go ahead and take it out. If you want to add something, you can put in some more documentation, a readme.txt or a license file. Again, you just have to copy this portion file to file, paste it in there, and then that file also needs to exist in your zip file. Below this, just a little bit, you'll see a different way of creating the file. this actually has a path. So you can see for the resource file for blog ASCX, we've actually put a path, and that path is from your module root. So in our case, it would be desktop modules /blog, and then it would put a slash in app local resources. If you needed to, if you had images underneath of this, you could do something like this. To put it into the correct place. For now, I'm just going to fix that. So that's how you put stuff into subdirectories and create subdirectories. There are other ways of doing this. There's several different ways of creating a DNN. You can actually zip the files up and then put a resource file in here and tell it what to unzip and let it create all the directories. But I think that this is probably a little easier and makes a little sense. One other thing you want to pay attention to is this version number right here. Okay, this is the version number for your module, but more importantly, with this DNN zip, you're going to see a reference in here, right here, to a SQL data provider. Now, this is the file that we're copying over here. You can tell it because it's within file tags. But what that version is going to do is it's going to look for something that starts with those numbers 010000 SQL data provider. And when you go ahead and install your DNN module, it's going to look for this file and then run it. And that SQL data provider with all these zeros is going to have a bunch of SQL statements. And those SQL statements are going to create our tables, create our stored procedures, and do anything SQL based that we need to get done. So you want to pay careful attention, make sure that the numbers here match the numbers up here so that it knows what to run, and as you change versions, it's going to change what's going on. If we go down and look in our SQL data provider over here, you'll see there's already an 010000 SQL data provider. So we've got a shell of that, and all they really have in there is some comments. There's really no stored procedures or any kind of info in there, so we're going to have to create that information ourselves and put it in there. The other thing that is commonly, now this is optional, but you commonly add it, is an uninstall SQL data provider. And again, you see the shell just has some comments. What this is code, and it says it right here pretty clearly. This is code to remove the tables and the stored procedures. This is really for the DBA in case they install your module and they want to uninstall it later. It's easy enough just to delete the module definition here and even delete the folder underneath the module definition, but it's kind of tough to figure out what tables were created and what stored procedures were created. The DBA won't know that off the top of his head. So this uninstall SQL data provider file is really just a courtesy to the DBA in case they want to get rid of your module. You'll put all your drop statements here. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and start adding some files. Okay, the first thing we want to do is make sure that blog.zip is open up so that we can add files into it. Now, what files do we need to add in? Well, we need to add in everything that's listed as a file in here, in this blog.dnn. We haven't really added anything that wasn't there originally, so we're in luck in this case that we can just kind of go through and put just about everything that we have into here. But be aware that if you added any extra files, if you made some more ASCX files, or if you have some documentation, things like that, make sure that you not only add a file comment here, a file tag, but that it also goes into your zip file. So let me shrink this down for a moment. We'll open up Windows Explorer and go over to DotNetNuke, Desktop Modules, Blog. Now just be very careful here. Make sure that everything that needs to go into this file goes. One thing I want to note right now, though, is that you do not copy any of your VB files unless you have some reason to do so. These aren't needed. All that's compiled into your DLLs. So typically you do not include VB files. So we have blog ASCX, our edit file, our settings file, the icon, You don't need to add your solution files, obviously. Your module CSS, and we didn't add any of our own CSS in here, but again, you can just add your own CSS and it will be specific to this module. We don't need these particular resource files, but we will need some files from app local resources, so we're going to make sure that those go in. Let me see if there's anything else that we need here. User, we don't need any of these VBs, so I think we're good to go on these. I'm going to go ahead and pop them right in. Say OK, and those are in my zip file. We'll open up app local resources. All three of these need to go in there. Say OK. I don't have any documentation. I don't have installation is what we're putting in there right now. What we should make sure is in there is the blog.dnn. File itself goes in there. And then under providers, SQL Data Provider, we're going to need to include the files we talked about, which is 010000 SQL Data Provider and the uninstall. Again, none of the VB files goes in here. And the other two files that we still need are under .NetNuke bin. And those are our blog and blog SQL Data Provider. Now I do want to mention one thing here, and I don't think I'm going to bother changing this for the time being, but we're about to release our module, and you can tell by the PDB files in here and so forth that we're still working in a debugging mode. What would really be smart would be to, just before release, go in and change your properties. Configuration properties, maybe even use Configuration Manager, and change it to release. There we go. And now everything is set in release mode, and then you can go ahead and build your project so that they'll run a little faster and won't have all that debugging properties in there. As a matter of fact, I'll just go ahead and do that now. Configuration is release. Let me just make sure. Yes. Oh, okay, it did for both of them. So we're safe. And I'll do a quick build. Good, that built okay. So we can go back out and grab these one more time, and we'll put the release versions into our zip file. Good. Great, now we have the fastest running DLLs that we can put out there. This is pretty good at this point. What we need to do, however, is, like I said, these data provider and uninstall are completely empty at this point in time. And those need to get information into them, and that information needs to be in a particular format. So we're going to cover that next. Okay, for the purposes of this next part, what I've done is gone ahead and I went out to the .NetNuke website and I downloaded from there their forum and blog private assembly with this date on it. What I'm going to do is open that up, and up top here you'll see again a familiar kind of numbering system for versions and SQL Data Provider. What we're going to do is open up one of those with a text editor. And I chose this one because it's a pretty good example of how our file is going to look. So you'll see something a little different in here, which is you'll see a lot of database owner in brackets and object qualifier in brackets. And these are going to be replaced by .NetNuke on the fly as things get installed. Database owner is almost always going to be DBO, but again, that's not true in every system, which is why it's done this way. And then some people might have some sort of object qualifier, some two-letter code or something along those lines that they use. And again, that's going to be handled by this. The problem is that when we create our own scripts, they're not going to have things written out quite as clearly And there's a couple of different ways of going about this. We might have to change them by hand, or again, we can go back to CodeSmith and use the templates, and there's advantages and disadvantages to both. You'll note, though, that as we start to go through here, that you will see both of these in some places. Like here's a create table that says database owner object qualifier. But if we start to go down to the stored procedures, some things have, for example here, here's a select from, and the select from only has the object qualifier and not the database owner. This is how I see it written all the time. I don't think that it will hurt you to put the database owner here as well, but I don't usually see it written that way, and so I will advise you to try and follow the way everybody else is doing it, because if it works for them, it's going to work for you. So that's probably the best way to try and handle it. You can see before every table name, though, you're definitely going to have object qualifier, and in some cases, such as here, create procedure, you're going to have database owner object qualifier, and so that's what we're going to shoot for. So how do we get this code? Well, there's two ways of going about it, and we'll look at two of them real quickly. First way is, here, let me just open up Enterprise Manager again, because we happen to have it going in the background. And I think the best way to do this is, we're in DotNetNuke, tables, good. I'll go into SQL Query Analyzer. There's actually several ways of doing this. Let me go into DotNetNuke, user tables, it's kind of hard to see over there, DBO blog, and script object to new window. This is one way of doing it. We can do a create, or a drop, or select, insert, script object to file, to clipboard, and our scripting options. So what we can do is create like our drop statement for this, and then later on go and say, okay, also insert it. Let me go back to drop. Let's just take a look at this real quick, because we were just talking about some of those properties, and I said that DBO would be your most common thing that's in there. So it says DBO, select star from DBO sysObjects. If we go back and look at our text editor, let me go up to the top here, it says select star from sysObjects, where object ID equals database owner object qualifier. So let's look at what we have here, where ID equals object ID. Right there is where we need to add database owner object qualifier. So if we do it this way, we're going to have to do it by hand. If you build this script through the SQL Query Analyzer, you'll see that it follows the same format as what you see here. It says if exists, select from, so forth, as you see in this SQL data provider that the core team uses. Another way you can do it is to go out to SQL Enterprise Manager, and I think probably from here is best place to do it. All tasks, generate SQL script, and we'll want to do something like add blog, I'm not going to pick everything right now. I'll pick the add blog, and then we'll go down to the tables. If I can find it. Here's our blog table. Okay, so here's our add blog and blog. And we'll generate a create and a drop for every object. And I think everything else is okay. We don't need to script the entire database. What you probably will want to do is script primary keys, full text indexes, if you use them, indexes, things like that. Say okay. And I'm going to say go right to my desktop, my SQL. And I'll do this real quickly just to show you what that looks like if you've never done it before. If you have, then just go ahead and skip ahead. We shrink everything. And there again we have all of our if exists, and our create tables. This is really a very good way of building the entire thing. If we selected all of our stored procedures plus all of our tables, we'd have everything right here, and then we just need to go through and again add the database owner and the object qualifier in the correct places. There is one other way to do this, and I'll show that to you right now. Is we will go in, let me close some of this up, go into Codesmith, and you will see VB stored procedures right here. Great. Choose our table, our object qualifier, generate, and there you go. Of course, this time you see the same thing, if exists, select, but now you'll see that the code generator has actually put the database owner and object qualifier in there for you in the proper place where it belongs. This is a really good way to go about building a lot of this information. The problem with this method is that we've already gone ahead and changed a lot of this information, such as our get procedure, our list where we went in and added portal ID, module ID, things like that it wasn't asking for originally. So if we just stuck with this script verbatim, then we're going to get stored procedures that don't match what we have. How you go about doing this is really up to you. What I tend to do is use this script right here as a base, and then go in, re-add the stored procedures that I know I changed, and use this as a model to change them back again. And that's what I'm going to do in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. I'll close it out, and I'm going to paste it in here and save it. Okay, so everything we have that we need is in there now, and most of it's in the right format. So what did we change? We changed blog list, I'm pretty sure. Let me go back and look at blog list. Stored procedures. Now if you remember, we didn't call it blog list. We called it, if I can get that far, list blog. Again, this is going to be a problem because we changed the way things were named. Let me double check. I think I have my own. Sorry about that. I'm pretty sure there's a Seabury design version of this, and let's see if that actually got changed or not. Codesmith, Seabury design, stored procedures. Blog, generate. I'll copy that. I'll paste it. There. Delete blog, update blog. Now all these names at least are in the right order, so we'll know what we're looking for. So okay, list blog. I can close this out now. I don't need my SQL query analyzer anymore. Good, now we have a little more room. List blog, and what I'm just going to do is copy this whole thing, and then we'll kick back over real quick, and I'm going to paste it right here underneath the go and see what's different. Okay, so we added these, just like that. And we added a where clause from blog. From blog. Great. Okay. Just double checking to be sure. Now we can save that. And I think we also changed our get blog procedure. There's add blog. That was blog list. Here's get blog. So, because we took out that module ID, if I remember. And if that's the case, let's just do it by hand. Module ID, we'll take it right out. And we don't need this hand here where module ID is. So that looks pretty good, but let me just double check and make sure that I haven't forgotten. Get blog. Yep, we took that out. I didn't really need to take module ID out, but that's okay. And we're good to go. I can even put module ID back in. Doesn't really matter where, as long as it gets selected. Okay, update blog, add blog, delete blog, all stayed the same. So now we have a perfectly good SQL data provider file that we can work with. And I'm going to just copy all this, Control C it, close that out. And probably the best place to change this is to go into here. Tighten up the end a little bit. And I'm going to save it so that we have it to play with in the future. And now we can go ahead and go back into DotNetNuke, desktop modules, blog, providers, SQL data provider, and just make sure that we re-add this with the changed information. Now the other thing you'd want to do, and I'm not going to do it for purposes of time right now, is we'd want to go through and update the uninstall provider with all the drop statements, which would be very much the same as what we have in the first file, just without all the adds afterwards. So probably pretty much the top few lines of this file will be our uninstall. But we're okay right now. So with that being said, here's what we need to do. We can go ahead and close out our zip file. I think I'm going to close out of this for now. Okay. Now here's where it gets a little touchy. What I need to do is upload this somewhere to test it. The best way to do this is to have a second instance of .NET running, which I don't have on this machine right now. So I have two options. I have several options. One is I can install a second instance of .NET on my machine, upload it to that, and see if it works. If I tried to do that right now, the problem is it would drop my tables and stored procedures, and that would be kind of ugly if it didn't work for some reason. The other thing you can do is go ahead and move that file, and by that file, I'm sorry, let me be a little more clear. Go under desktop modules, take this whole file, this whole blog module, move it somewhere else, because again, when you upload, all of this is going to get overwritten, and if there's a problem, you don't want to wipe out your original source code and then go back into SQL Server and delete all of your tables and stored procedures that matter, and then you can go ahead and upload. That's another way to do it. Or if you have a running site somewhere, you can just use your running site as a test. Be aware that if it's a live site, that might cause a problem for you. Again, if something blew up, if your SQL was not well formed, that could be a real problem. So hang on a second and let me figure out the best way to handle this for you.